Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we're talking about LA Confidential today.
Yes.
A film we picked out of a lineup, pretty much. Looking for something to watch after we talked about the other thing, the Charlie Kaufman thing. It was on Amazon Prime. I'd never seen this before.
No.
In fact, I didn't even really know it was about cops. I mean, I guess it had a crime edge to it, but I thought it was about like movie stars, really. So it was a sort of surprise to me, actually, what the film turned out to be about. You clearly have seen this before.
I've seen it before, yeah. And I liked it very much, actually. Well, I've always liked it. But I've never been tempted to revisit it.
You've only really seen it the once, then?
So I saw it once when it came out.
97.
97. And I liked it very much, actually. But this is the first time I've seen it in, 20-odd years?
23 years. Yeah.
I've forgotten much of it.
Mm.
And the things that I remembered impressed me still.
Right. Okay, well, we'll get into them. So the story's about... It's a noir of sorts, and we'll get into that, I think.
Yeah, it's a noir.
Yeah, yeah. It's set in and around the LAPD in the 50s.
Yeah. In 53, very specifically.
Is it?
Yeah.
Alright, I didn't pick up on that. So there are these three cops. There's Russell Crowe, who has a real agenda against men who beat up women, and he kind of turns Incredible Hulk whenever that happens, and he can't stop himself from, beating them up. And so he's not exactly by the book. There's Kevin Spacey, who's a kind of a superstar cop in some respect. People seem to know him, and he has this relationship with a magazine, which is called Hush Hushness, and it's based on a magazine called Confidential.
It's based on Confidential.
Which was a real magazine. And there was a famous photo of... Which movie star was it who had the marijuana bust?
Robert Mitchum.
Right. So and a marijuana bust is set up and happens here for the magazine. Yes. Right. That's how you're introduced to this relationship that he has with the magazine. The magazine is run by Danny Devito.
Yes.
Who's fab.
Who's fab. Yes.
Just joy whenever you see him in anything, really. And the third cop is Guy Pearce, who's young. He's really by the book. I mean, he wears glasses. If there was any kind of greater sort of symbolic signifier that you're a nerd, he's wearing glasses, and he has a very revealing conversation, and very kind of blatant conversation, right at the start with the chief, who's played by James Cromwell, where James Cromwell's asking him, are you willing to beat people up and do all this extrajudicial stuff in order to... get justice and get your man. And he says, no, I won't do that. Yeah. I mean, it's like, people saying, oh, this is a fantastic script. Some of it, I think, is a bit on the nose. But basically, these three cops, they come into conflict, they come into entanglement, they don't just join up and go off with it. It's a real ensemble piece, and it's a real ensemble story, in that, kind of characters are joined up at different times, and they separated at different times. The first thing that happens, really, is that Guy Pearce... is willing to testify against the entire LAPD for beating up a load of Mexican civilians in the cells, which I think is based on a real thing as well.
I don't know, but it must have been.
I think it's called Bloody Christmas,
right? Okay.
Which happened in 51, which was pretty much the same thing, and a lot of cops went down for it and that sort of thing.
Right.
In this, Guy Pearce is willing to testify against a lot of them because he wants to see justice. The entire police force is immediately set against him. I mean, it really made me think of, we've just, I think this week, it was just this week, had the grand jury for Breonna Taylor's murderers. Breonna Taylor was the woman who was killed in her own house by some cops who decided it was up to them to shoot whoever. And I think the only cop or cops that had indictments against them in the grand jury were those who shot through walls. The grand jury has proven that property is more important in America than the lives of black people. So it really made me think of that. And so much of what's been going on in the last, few years really, but especially in the last few months since Black Lives Matter kind of started protesting and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were killed. There's a lot in this about the police.
Yes.
Closing ranks.
Yes. It's based on a James Ellroy novel, and it's part of a very, very famous series of novels set in LA called the LA Quartet.
Right.
Yeah, I think the most famous one is probably the Black Dahlia, which is based on the Black Dahlia murder. So
was the film The Black Dahlia based on that as well?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So it's an imaginary world, but that's based on real LA crime history. right?
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the history of LA...
Yeah, you'd be familiar with these incidents and these cases, and certainly if you're familiar with movie history, you definitely get a lot more pleasure out of what you're seeing, because you can know who Lana Turner is, right? Yeah. So, and who Johnny Stompanato is and things like that. I think for me it kind of worked as a narrative. I mean, I was very surprised by the twists and turns. Yeah, so it's a film that I've seen before, but obviously it's so long ago now that all the twists and turns kind of surprised me and kept me in suspense and so on. And in comparison to the Kaufman film, by the way, this was such an easy watch, right? It's not it's not one of those films where you're tempted to put the pause button on and get a coffee and no,
that's true.
I mean, we interrupted it a couple of times because I had other things to attend to, but I could just as easily have sunk into it and watched it all the way through without blinking, right? It really holds and grabs your attention, which is, a major achievement, actually, I think, because, I don't know about you, but for me, it's actually getting rarer and rarer, the films that really hold me like that, particularly at home.
I don't know if that's getting rarer for me, really, although sometimes I just kind of tend to watch things I already like. So I know, so I don't know about new watches, really. I've never really thought about it. This in particular, I think probably held my attention slightly less than yours, although I think some of it I was just kind of competing with the complexities of the plot and the number of characters to keep up with, and even by the end I was still not sure who one of the characters was.
Well, I think you disliked the, what's his name?
Well, I really, really dislike the Russell Crowe character, but not him personally. I dislike his construction, his entire conceptualization.
Yes,
I
know.
Like.
But what I'm trying to say is that you disliked it so much that actually the film had to win you over on a level that it didn't have to win me over. Yeah, every time he did something, you were like, ah!
Yeah, no, but that's true. But it was kind of compartmentalized. Like I didn't, I wasn't distracted by hating him to the point where even when he wasn't there, I was like hating him in the background. It's only when he showed up and did something I thought, oh, he's doing the thing again.
Yes. And actually, it's interesting because I was reading that is the character that they kept most of from the novel. Yeah.
Right.
And it's a bit to its detriment because, so I think it's a very, very good screenplay. But actually, I think it's a testament to Russell Crowe's achievements as an actor, that he overcomes what is a really badly drawn character. I mean, I say it's badly drawn because it's too pat, right? So, like you said, he's like an Incredible Hulk kind of character who can't contain himself when it comes to men abusing women, right? And then you're given this backstory. Well, the reason he's like that is because his mom was the victim of domestic violence, right? And then, it turns out that he can't control himself with the women he loves either. So, it's just about this guy who can't control himself. And which nonetheless, the film at the end kind of rewards and gives him a happy ending, not even questioning whether he can change or what's changed about him or will he hit her again.
Yeah, literally the only kind of redeeming thing to him, really, in the whole film. Well, I mean, I guess at a basic level, you like the fact that he can't contain himself when he is confronted with men abusing women, because he's kind of it's the right thing to be appalled by that, but he overdoes it and he loses it and everything. And then of course there's that sort of quote unquote ironic part where when the Guy Pearce character sleeps with his girlfriend, he finds out, then he hits her. So kind of he becomes what he hates. And
yes.
Isn't that clever? But then kind of, I suppose, the redeeming thing is that he doesn't kill Guy Pearce. You'd think he's really, really going to. And Guy Pearce says as much to him. They've sent you here to kill me. That's why they showed you this photo. And the fact that he doesn't is like, oh, maybe he can control himself. But I don't like really anything about how that character's conceptualized or put
Russell
across.
Crowe's fantastic though, because he
is very good.
He makes you, that scene where he's walking in the rain and he's just discovered that the woman he loves has slept with another guy, but he doesn't know that she did it for him.
But he doesn't get to be as subtle as he can be in his best roles.
Oh no, I think he's great. Actually,
I think he's good, but I think other roles have offered him a lot more opportunity to be better.
Well, the role is too pat, but he is great with it. Actually, I think. In fact, I think everyone in the film is great. I think Kim Basinger, she's so interesting to watch because, there's that expression of the bruised blonde.
Right.
She kind of epitomizes it, right? Like, she's really, really beautiful, very sexy, and yet there's something like so sad about her, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which obviously fits in with the character, but I think is also part of her persona. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, her whole character is she's been given surgery to look like Lana
No, she
Turner.
hasn't. She says she hasn't.
That's right. I beg your pardon. That's right. But she's part of a company, Fleur de Lis, I think it's called.
Yes.
That has women subjected to medical procedures to make them look like movie stars. She's one who's avoided that, but she still works for this agency. She's a prostitute.
Yes.
So men
who
can
looks
have...
like who's a Veronica Lake lookalike.
Yeah.
But who comes by it naturally rather than like the Rita Hayworth impersonator who had to have plastic surgery, right?
And it leads to a very funny Lana Turner joke as well.
Yes. And this ostensibly there was a brothel in Hollywood which provided lookalike movie star lookalikes. So this is also something that's based on kind of real stuff in LA.
And then her thing is she works this place, but everyone wants to have sex with Veronica Lake. No one wants to have sex with Kim Basinger or whatever her character's name is. And the one guy who does is the guy who ends up hitting her in the face. It's all very complex and brooding.
Well, I mean, I think the characterization of the Russell Crowe character to me is the only weak link, really, because it's too facile, it's too pat, it's too ordered. So maybe it's a good thing, actually, that the Guy Pearce character and
Spacey.
Yeah, Kevin Spacey, had less borrowed from the novel. Though actually, I'm surprised because James Ellroy, I think, is a great novelist. So I'm sure that all of the characters are more complexly drawn in the novel.
I like the other thing I like about Kim Basinger. I suppose you kind of alluded to this. Is is her look, and her look really communicates like the glamour of the period, the smoky femme fatale glamour. Thing. Well, it's not what she is, but it has that feeling.
No, she has that. I mean, and she has that very much in this actually. And of course, it is dark. It's a small town girl, who goes to LA to be an actress and ends up like a hooker. So it's kind of all overladen with like sadness and corruption and and so on. So the film does have all the elements of noir. Right, kind of there's murder and there's deviant in quotation marks sexualities and and sex for sale and drugs and there's all these attempts to market the police department as like upstanding citizens and obeying the rule of law, and everything that you see is like corrupt and up for sale and up for grabs. So
everything apart from a tragic or downbeat ending.
I think you overestimate the ending because, I mean, kind of, in some ways, I don't understand the ending.
No.
Because the Russell Crowe character, wasn't he meant to be dead?
He gets shot very badly, and in a way that you would think he's got to be dead from this, and then it's revealed that he's alive and very badly wounded.
Yeah. So, but then they're moving to Tennessee, is it?
Arizona.
So was he left for dead? Is he meant to be dead? Is he now no longer a cop? Has he been kicked out of the force? Has he been pensioned out of the force? I mean, I think actually that's an important element that somehow isn't resolved.
Yes, well, it's not resolved at all. That's it. It's no. There's lines of dialogue missing there that would convey that.
So, so that looks neat, but isn't necessarily so. And then, of course, the Guy Pearce character, again, it looks neat, but it isn't. He basically lied. He made a hero of the guy who killed his father, right? Who actually does end up getting away with it. I mean, he ends up dead, but he ends up being perceived as a hero by everyone else. He maneuvers this thing onto a promotion, right? So, kind of in a way justice is kind of done, but it kind of isn't done, and certainly not the way that he would have imagined he'd done it at the very beginning of the film. So he has himself been corrupted by the process.
Yeah, and he says, I'm playing ball with them because they're using me, I'm using them for a bit, and so on.
That's right. So, that's something he wouldn't have said at the beginning.
True. James Cromwell didn't kill his dad, though. He just kind of ends up representing the guy who killed his dad.
Okay.
Yeah. So the guy who killed his dad is this Rollo Tomasi, I think, who's just the name he gave to the guy. He's never going to find him, but what he represents is the guy who gets away with it.
Yes, okay, I got that,
Yeah.
So,
but still, there's an upbeat feeling to that ending, I think. Despite those complications, he gets to go off with the girl. It's sunny outside.
But noirs...
And they've defeated the corruption to a point.
Noirs often lead you with an upbeat feeling. So, you know the world is corrupt, but also, some people get away with it. Some people have a good time with it. I mean, at the end of Gilda, kind of Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford kind of waltz off. And many noirs, actually, there's this impression of a happy ending rather than a real happy ending. And this is a classic case of it, because it's an impression of a happy ending. That, the more you dig, the less happy it becomes, so to speak,
Yeah, I think you might have a point, but it still feels like too much of a victory for me to be kind of all in on it.
You're so judgmental,
What do you say? I'm a film critic.
And Russell Crowe, the Russell Crowe character got you from the beginning. A guy who hates women.
It's just so simple. I mean, come on, that's like... I do understand why this won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. I understand why it's such a respected screenplay. It's very, very tight, really. I mean, even though you say at the end, actually, there's this missing thing with Russell Crowe, which I think is right. Still, kind of details, kind of details are brought up and come back in the right places. And
yes.
I like the way that the three main characters, the three cops, are interwoven in that, their stories are separate and they follow different cases, but they interlink and they kind of have competing agendas, and then they turn into the same agendas. Particularly, like, for instance, when Spacey and Pearce join up, and Pearce has this thing about convincing Spacey to do the right thing, which I think is a wonderful bit and a wonderful line where he says, "Why'd you become a cop?" And Pearce says this thing about Rollo Tomasi, and I never want to let that guy get away with it. And he says, "Why'd you become a cop?" And I really was wondering what Spacey would say.
Yes, and that's like brilliant line.
And he says, "I don't remember."
Yeah,
I mean, what a great line.
Yeah,
and then he goes to do the right thing.
Anyway, we haven't talked at all about the way the film looks, and I think in this film it's just as important as almost anything else, because it is a noir, but it's a noir in color, and it's an LA noir, so actually it's also very sunny. It's full of like modern houses and great decor and costumes and so on. But they're almost all light. Certainly the ones that the protagonist wears, the Kim Basinger character wears, and it's often filmed in daylight, right? And yet, kind of along the edges, you do have all those other elements of noir. Yeah, the lighting, the blinds kind of hitting. Often, kind of, characters are filmed through screens, through their reflections on the screens, right? You also get dark moments in motels, in close spaces, and in
the crawl space under the house.
Yeah,
you see the dead body.
So that sense of corruption kind of seeps through like the whole film. Often through the edges, through corridors, through underneath. The body of the house, or the systemic racism that you see in the film. The duplicitousness, it's all there.
There's one shot in particular that I really loved. I mean, I was looking for shots that I loved, and I didn't see many, although I liked the kind of overall aesthetic design. I think I found it quite appealing. But the one shot that I love is when Guy Pearce is in the interrogation room at the end. He's wrapping up and he's telling everyone, "Here's what we've discovered," and so on. And he's just talking to two cops, but outside, behind the two-way mirror, there's the DA, someone else, and a bunch of other guys, and they're all just like they're like the decision makers,
Yes.
And so he can't see them, but he absolutely knows that they're there. He's telling this story, and the shot is from outside. It's looking at the two-way glass, so you see him, and then above him you see this chorus of decision makers reflected, and they really look like they're standing behind and over him, and it's a beautifully orchestrated thing.
Yeah, the film has a lot of those, and also in ways that are very clever because they rhyme with all of those other sequences where he's on the other side of the window, and he plays with the sound and who gets to listen and who doesn't, and manipulates
that's it.
and orchestrates the situation from the other side.
It had that feeling of like in something like V for Vendetta, when kind of people, when there's someone on a massive screen talking to you, and that's like the boss.
Yeah.
V for Vendetta is not the only one. In fact, it happens in the Avengers films where there's like that council of leaders that Nick Fury addresses at times, and it has that feeling of like the council of elders.
Yes.
Well,
the film has many shots like that are filmed through the two-way mirror, reflections on the two-way mirror, or that kind of like reframes, and all the decision makers, are on one side of the screen, and it's very clever and it's very effective. I think there are very clever moments of direction, right? So the scene where Guy Pearce shoots the guy in the elevator, and then the door opens and the shot is held on his face, right? And you have this moment of suspense where you think there might have been somebody else in the lift he killed, right? And then, but actually you're never shown, you're never given the answer to that. Yeah, so you're made to think that there's something wrong with that, or that there's a potential for something wrong with that, and then the camera never cuts to what he sees in the lift, So I thought that was kind of clever. But I also think there's nothing visually astonishing about the film.
No, I agree with that. And that's sort of what I was looking for. In fact, what I was looking for was something along the lines of To Live and Die in LA. I didn't feel that sense of LA as a character in itself, at least not visually. There were icons, iconic buildings and things that you saw.
Yes. I think you do. Well, I did get the sense of that, of LA as a character in the film, for sure. That modern house, the mansion where the rich guy lives. The nightclubs of the period, the cinemas, the oil wells going up and down. That you actually see. I don't know if you remember in A Star Is Born, right? But Judy Garland has a lot of a monologue with the James Mason as an oil well, kind of, goes up and down in the background. So that evokes LA and the LA of a particular period. Again, the women on the waitresses on roller skates, kind of, the drive-ins, and I mean there is a real sense of, LA is a character in the film. You wouldn't have had the glamour or the levels of corruption or the levels of drugs and sex if it wasn't LA. You wouldn't.
Well, I think
it wouldn't be the same if it was like in Portland, Oregon, or something, right?
I think the thing that most evokes that feeling of LA as a character to me, based on the kind of really the images and stereotypes I already have of LA. It's not like I've been there, would be the relationship between the police and celebrity. That's not, I think, something that you would get in New York, for instance. You get a relationship between the police and politics and business.
Well, you might get it in New York, but you almost wouldn't get it anywhere else.
Sure.
Yeah. You would get it in New York because, like if you see, what's the film with Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis, the noir, where he plays a gossip columnist. Burt Lancaster. Look it up. It's like 56, 58, something like that.
Sweet Smell of Success.
Sweet Smell of Success, right. Burt Lancaster plays a really corrupt gossip columnist who's got the cops in his pockets, and Tony Curtis is a press agent trying to get his clients' names in the column. Right. But in order to do that, he's got to do all kinds of sleazy things for the columnist, right? So you do get a sense of that kind of combination of celebrity and law in New York, but obviously it's not. L.A. is Hollywood,
exactly.
Right? So it's at its most intense there. That was all very pleasurable to me to see. If you're interested in films, the whole setting is kind of like an added pleasure on its own, really. But there's something about the film, I'm trying to think, why isn't it great? You know. Yeah, like I mean, it's good. I enjoyed it very much, but you know, to me, it's not a great noir.
Is it overly complex?
No, not at all. Actually, I would say the opposite. Yeah,
It's too simple.
but I think it is too simple.
Bloody hell, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, but the view of the characters is too pat. So everybody has their motivation and their reasons, right? And the thing about the great noirs is that they're always ambiguous and conflicting. Yeah, kind of, you know, people often do lousy things because they're people, because they might be a bit too greedy, but only at the wrong time. They're, you know, often they're like, or whatever, right? Here, it's like everybody is given a motivation and a reason, and, you know, and so really neatly explained, and, you know, I mean, you know, in the way that the best noirs are. Maybe in a better noir, you know, the Kim Basinger character would have ended up as a hooker because she loves to fuck, right? And, you know, whatever, like, you know, there could be a million reasons why you would do that rather than just, you know, the cliched one of you went to become a film star and then you know, you ended up a hooker and you know. Yeah, I mean, Kim Basinger was fantastic, but the conceptualization of the character is a bit of a cliche. I mean, the only novelty that it has is that it draws on that history of lookalike movie stars, right? You know.
And it's the visual dimension, I think, that you picked up on. I do think, as appealing as some of the look is, I like the way scenes are staged when you have conversations. I think that's quite interesting, and it's all about looks and who's addressing who and that sort of thing. But there's something quite workaday about the way it's filmed.
There is. I mean, you know, what you remember, or certainly what I remembered about the film, was the look of the actors, you know, particularly Kim Basinger, actually. You know, kind of, you remember her wearing that hood and looking so beautiful, right? And of course that's an image, yeah. But actually, it's her that makes the image almost, yeah. It's not necessarily, you know, kind of the filmmakers giving you this really memorable kind of image. I mean, it is, but it isn't, because, you know, what you remember about the film, really, or what I remember anyway, is the faces of actors, yeah. So Kim Basinger, and for me,
Russell Crowe. You love him. It's 23 years ago, and he's looking very trim and young.
Well, actually,
and as you say, this is the film that made him.
Yeah, I've grown not to love him, actually. But, you know, he's just really great in this, actually. There's no way getting around it, really.
Yeah.
So,
what about Kevin Spacey? We've not addressed him. I think this is probably the first Kevin Spacey film we've watched. And 3 years ago...
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this will wear out, you know. Things will change. But for the time being, you can't look at him without the child molestation is maybe...
That's too far.
Too far.
I think the accusations were about coming onto and trying to pull underage people, like 13, 14 years old, at parties, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, you're right. You know, but anyway, you can't help thinking about that when you look at him, really. So, just like when Rock Hudson first died and, you know, he had AIDS and it came out, it's almost like you couldn't watch Rock Hudson film without responding to what you knew about the character, replace the characterization. In this film, it wasn't so bad, and actually you could see how he is really terrific, right?
Yeah, no, I think we agreed when we were watching it. You said, it's a shame we lost him.
Yes.
He's a very good actor.
Yeah.
You know.
Mind you, he's playing like a complete sleaze, a scumbag, so...
although it goes against what I would have expected, because I was going, oh, he's obviously the source of this corruption. And he turns out not to be. And actually he's obviously been corrupted to some degree by the police. He says he's forgotten why he's a policeman, and he has this deal with Danny Devito to bust high profile people for the papers and so on. But, you know, he goes on to do the right thing, and doing the right thing gets him killed.
Yes. You know, another thing that I was thinking about that is a sign of how this very good film is not up to the highest standard.
Yeah.
And that is the Danny DeVito characterization. Because he's such a joy to watch, Danny DeVito. And he brings life and zest and, to all his scenes. Though, he's meant to be a corrupt and corrupting character who really doesn't care much about the rest. Right? But actually, his death is not made emotional or significant.
It was for me, but that's just because I saw dead Danny DeVito and I went, oh.
Well,
I mean, that's really all it was. I have such a soft spot for him.
Well, I love him, but actually the film doesn't bring any tragic dimension, or it doesn't convey any more meaning. It's almost like, he was a bit of a slime ball, so he dies. But actually, the film could have brought, and I think the character deserves something else to be made of that death, right? You just get like a long shot of him looking grey on the floor. I mean, please. It's
he's killed because he's a loose end.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to really feel bad for him about, in the sense that he's not a good person, but the film doesn't do anything with it. It happens and it goes.
Yes. I mean, which I think is it's also bad showmanship, to have a character that brings so much life and just throw it away at the end.
Yeah.
You could have made something out of that death or conveyed something. So, yeah.
And it doesn't convey enough about the people who do it either.
Yeah.
Because you don't really feel for him. It's an easy character to kill off with no kind of... It doesn't tell you enough about the people who are doing it. Oh, they're willing to do that. Well, I mean, who wouldn't be willing to kill that guy? He's not a nice person. Someone's going to kill him one day.
And he himself has been responsible for the death of that actor.
Yeah.
So, but you could have done more with that, really. Or at least made it more complex, right? Or challenged the audience emotion, or brought out the full scumbag, at the end, right? Like pleading for his life. I think the character deserved a more significant ending, and it's a lack of imagination and nous on the filmmaker's part that they didn't draw it out or convey it.
Up until he dies, though, he's great. I said to you that no one does... Danny DeVito does better than anyone else. Someone who smells opportunity.
Yeah.
Chases it down. I love that. There's a bit in The Rainmaker, which is the Francis Ford Coppola legal drama, where... they're having the meeting outside, I think, with the judge, whatever, the deposition, and there are people around, like behind the fence, looking at this happening, and he goes up to them and he's just handing out business cards. I think someone's got a broken arm and he says, I can get you some money for that. It's fantastic. He's like an 11-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And Danny DeVito is really good. Yeah.
All right, so any last words?
I did like it, and I'm glad I've seen it. I don't think I was as blown away as... I mean, the film... I don't know, it's always been one of those that's like in the back of your head.
Yes.
Like, it stands out and it seems to mark something about the time it comes from, I guess. Something like that. And it's a film that was at the beginning of some actors' sort of stardom.
Yes. All three of them, I would say, because, I mean, obviously Kevin Spacey had already made an impact. But I do think it's the film that made Russell Crowe. And it's the film that brought Guy Pearce up to another level. And it's the film that Kim Basinger won the Oscar for after, having hung around Hollywood for, 15, 20 years previously. So it's a very significant film in a way. It is a landmark film. I just don't think it ranks amongst the greatest of LA noirs. Not a patch on Chinatown, let's put it that way.
No. It's in the Library of Congress, isn't it? As one of those, culturally, historically, aesthetically significant... Sorry, National Film Registry.
Yes.
So it's one of those.
It's lasted, right? Yeah. So that makes it a kind of classic of its own. Films that still continue to be watched 20, 30, 40 years later, I mean, you have to give them their due. They continue to be seen for a reason. And I think this film fits that criteria. It's just not,
No. I do think... I've seen this and I've seen 8 Mile of Curtis Hanson's. So there's a whole, kind of lots and lots of films that I'm missing, but... On the basis of those two, it's hard to see him as a great director.
I mean, I've seen that. I forgot what it was called, Women on the Window or something in the Window. And Bad Influence, the Hand That Rocks the Cradle, is it?
There's The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. There's The Bedroom Window.
The Bedroom Window.
Bad Influence.
Yeah, and they're all very good noirs, actually. But again, they're very good and they made an impact and they have that glamour actually, and that look. But, I kind of,
yeah, I know. You do sort of think what Friedkin would have done with this material, of everything
or
we said
even
there.
John Dahl, for me it's not quite up there. Though it's a very glamorous and pleasant watch.
And enormously successful.
Yes.
$130 million.
Yes, in $1997. So, all right, shall we wrap it up here?
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and I think Amazon. And Google Podcasts as well.
Wow, we get around.
And the social media is Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies. And our website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.